Jesus in My Life, episode 55.
Business was not designed just to make money. Business was designed to build the kingdom, seek the kingdom first and his righteousness, a right relationship with him, and everything gets added. What gets added in a business that's doing that is people, which you get to impact for the kingdom, and resources, which you get to sow back in to make the business grow. For more money? No. For more opportunity to touch more people, which then extends the kingdom, and it just goes on and on and on.
Welcome to Jesus in My Life, a podcast with Rob and Jack, where we interview everyday people like me and you about their extraordinary experiences with our Savior, Jesus Christ. Welcome to Jesus in My Life. This is Jack with my co-host Rob.
Hey guys, good to be with you today.
Everybody, we have a very special guest with us today, Glen White from Kingdom Business Catalysts. Glen has been an entrepreneur, a businessman for most of his life, and he has a really cool story about God calling him to take a leap of faith with him. And Glen has an amazing story of where that led to. So Glen, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, connect with you guys and share a little bit of the amazing journey that God put me on.
Awesome. Well, Glen, we kind of just hit the ground running. So we're not going to dive into your salvation story. We know you've been a Christian for a long time. Let's lead up to where God led you in the early 2000s. You were a businessman. Can you start there?
Sure. 2000 kind of is the milestone moment. I like to stick a flag in and remind myself. Doesn't seem like it's been that long, but it actually has been. I was in Northwest Montana. I was a VP of sales and marketing for a resort management company. We had 2 or 3 different properties involved in golf courses and ski mountains and all kinds of things. Had a great run. I had actually gotten there in 1995. We had 5 years of double-digit growth year on year on year for 5 years. Just a lot of system changes and innovation. Had an ownership that the developer was local, but the actual operation ownership was in Dallas, Texas. And we planted some vision and dreams, and they kind of gave me the leash or the reins, so to speak. And we got to do lots and lots of crazy things. So extremely successful. Amazing area. My wife, 3 kids out there. And part of this journey started with, I was given the opportunity. The ownership was a Catholic guy and wanted to give back to the community, kind of just had that thought process. And he said, hey, you know the region and the area. So as you get connected, you figure out kind of some nonprofits or local ministries or services that we should start pouring some money into as part of our, community operations. So through that, I got to get connected with, YWAM and different ministries and some churches and, teenage mom pregnancy and all this amazing stuff, which was really cool. The one connection we did make was to a prison ministry, and I'll circle back because that was kind of the catalyst. There was a guy that ran a prison ministry. He had been in prison, got released, and had been going back into really maximum security prisons and evangelizing and sharing Jesus, and had amazing stories. So we started sowing into that financially just to kind of support it as the mechanism of the business. So he showed up at the office one day and walked in. And he said, hey, Glen, yeah. I said, good to see you. And he says, yeah, I've been praying for you. I'm like, thanks, man. I appreciate that. And he's like, no, like I've been praying for you. Like God's put you on my heart. And it kind of changed, his tone of voice changed. And I'm like, okay. He says, in fact, I kind of need to talk to you. So we walked back to my office and I'm shutting the door and I'm kind of like, okay. He says, well, I don't know how to say this other than just tell you what God's been telling me. I'm like, I'm good. Let's do it. And he says, okay. He says, well, God wants to have me ask you a question. I said, okay, what's the question? And he says, if you want to experience something that you've never experienced before, are you willing to go to some place that you've never been before?
Wow. What a question.
Yeah, big, right? I'm like, and I knew it was big, but I couldn't really wrap my head or even my spirit around it at the moment. I said, is that it? He says, yep, that's it. And I said, okay, so if I want to experience something that I've never experienced before, the Lord's asking me if I'll go somewhere that I've never been before. He says, yep, you got it. He turned around and walked out the door. I'm like,
that's it.
The ultimate drive-by.
Yeah, right. I'm like, okay, I guess I've got to deal with this, right? And all I can say is internally, right, in my spirit is like, man, there's this shift of what does that mean? It was. I mean, I've had hunger for the Lord before, but this was a totally different thing. And I'm like, God, you're talking about something that I don't understand. So I literally sat down in my office, kind of rocked a little bit. And I'm like, wow, Lord, what are you saying? And then all I can do is describe, right? He kind of gave me this picture, right? This little movie in my head. And I'm like, what are you doing? He says, Glenn, this is where you are. And he showed me at the top. I'm in Montana, right? Top of these huge pine trees. I'm at the top of a tree, right? Which is moving a little bit with the wind, which was Mafra. And I'm hugging onto the trunk of the tree. And he's like, that's awesome. You're where you need to be and everything else. I'm like, okay. And then all of a sudden he says, I need you to just hang on to the trunk, but turn and look out this branch. So I'm hanging onto the tree and I turn and look, and he's standing at the end of a branch of a pine tree, which is basically bouncing up and down, easily 3 to 4 feet, right? As the wind's blowing, because the limb gets, more flexible on the way out. And he says, Glenn, you're at a place where you need to be, but you're holding on to the trunk. And I want you to let go of the trunk and walk out on the branch and experiencing something that you've never experienced before.
Wow.
And I took that home and I shared with my wife, and she says, well, what does that mean? And I said, I don't know. Less than probably, I don't want to exaggerate, less than a week later, the ownership of the company came to me and said, hey, you've done so well and we've done so well, we're going to sell half the company.
Wow.
And I'm like, what? Says, yeah, we're going to sell half the company because we're going to make a whole bunch of money on it. You totally have been part of that. So even though we're going to reduce the size of the company and some of the things that we're going to be administrating or whatever, you can stay on as VP of sales and marketing, keep those programs going, right? And you're going to reap the benefit, right? And I'm like, that's amazing, right? I went home, started praying, and God said, are you ready to let go of the trunk? Because I just showed you the branch that is moving, and you can stay where you are or you can step out.
Wow.
And I talked with my wife. I called the ownership and I gave 3 weeks notice and said, I can't stay.
What was their reaction?
Totally shocked. They're like, what? I said, I totally appreciate everything that we've done. I appreciate the offer. And I shared a little bit of the story. They probably wouldn't be able to take in everything. I said, I really feel that God's calling me to step out and do something different. Right. The next question was, well, what's that? I'm like, I have no idea. And they're like, are you kidding me? And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you, but that's what I've decided to do. And my wife confirmed it, saying, okay, well, what do you think that is? I'm like, I really don't know. Here's an interesting factor. When that happened, I had been in a church that we were experiencing signs and wonders and just amazing things and ministering and doing all this amazing stuff, right? So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go get involved in that and with the church. I mean, I'm the corporate guy, right? I took my pastor and everybody else I knew golfing because I had golf memberships at 9 championship courses within 30 minutes. I mean, it was, I had, right? Most people are like, dude, you've got the job of the whole state with what you're doing. And I'm like, yeah, I know, and all this stuff. So I started sharing with my friends, right, connected to the church, and some of the people that I actually did business with, that I had relationship with and knew that they were Christians. And the reaction was not what you would think. It's not what I thought. I'll just say that. So I had lunch with people that say, hey, what are you doing? What do you mean? What are you doing? I said, well, I'm quitting. Well, why? I mean, dude, you're set up and you've just been so successful. I'm like, no, but God said this. Like, okay, come on, man. And these are people that knew me. They were asking, do you have a drug problem? Are you Carolyn, my wife, okay? Right? Is there something that you've had hidden, that's exposed or whatever. I'm like, no, none of that's true. I mean, not one, like half a dozen, like, are you okay? Are you having a mental breakdown? I wasn't old enough for a quote unquote midlife crisis, but they were like, what is happening? And I'm like, no, this is what the Lord said. So I got to go figure it out. He just made it so plain to me anyway. And I think he knew me enough that there was almost a little challenge in there, and I'm kind of that kind of guy. And I'm like, okay, God, I've seen what you've been doing, right? I see that you blessed me in work, but now where I'm supposed to go. And that really was the catalyst.
Hold on, wait a minute, because I kind of want to press in a little bit more to the counsel of your friends.
Yeah.
Like, what was happening internally? Obviously, it was a team decision, you and your wife.
Absolutely.
That was a cohesive decision based on the confirmation of the Holy Spirit. Like, what was happening internally? Like, is it fair to say that you had like a peace that passes all human understanding, or was it, okay, Lord, you've told me to do this, and I'm going to go at this in some ways blindly, but increase my faith?
Yes. How's that for an answer?
Okay.
There was this, I was totally excited, totally scared to death, and yet totally knew that I really could not make any other choice than say yes. It's really, I'm even getting kind of emotional talking about it, to be honest with you. It's the place where biblically you've seen, right, these stories that seem like they're unreal, right? And we've kind of made them biblical heroes, which they are. But it was one of these moments where it's like, I could say no, but I don't understand how I could ever say no. And now that I've said yes, there is this peace, power, release, excitement, and it's not fear in the sense of, oh my gosh, it's not going to work. It's just like, I have released literally everything. And it's the freest I ever have been. And there's seasons of that all the way through this journey. And I'm like, oh, I get why David in the Bible could do some things. I get where Gideon, when the angels showed up, was like, but it was all these mixed emotions simultaneously. And then when the response came from my friends, even those that I believe could really understand, they got the principle, but then with somebody that was actually doing it, it was like, wait a minute.
Is it fair to say that the only way to really experience what you're describing is if you've been there or if you're there?
Absolutely. And what I didn't understand is when that decision was made, without me realizing what all the outcome of that would be, they were concerned, but almost jealous in the fact of, I know you and I've seen you do these things and the rewards have come, which they literally did. And he's like, isn't this the answer? And I'm like, well, yes, but it's not enough, right? If he's asking me to lay those things down, which totally all came from him. Absolutely. And they knew that because there's more, right? But I can't define to you what the more is. The Lord said there's more. And I don't know, he pushed the right button, or again, picked the right guy at the right time and everything else for me to go, okay. And then when his hand touched the business I had helped build, which made no earthly sense to sell at that point, even though they're going to make a bunch of money, right? In literally, hours, days, like exact time, and go boom, where it was, I'm like, okay, God, you've asked me the question. Mm-hmm. I'm pondering and believing and walking through that. And it's like, he literally said, Glenn, let me give you an exclamation point. Bink. These people that aren't totally connected to me just made a decision to drastically change your environment that you've been quote unquote successful in. And what it did is I realized the fact of, oh my gosh, he is 100% in control of everything. And he's making it very obvious. If he will do that, it was like the catapult, right? The catalyst that pushed me forward. Basically, the fact that, well, if you can do that, then you can do anything. And I've got to go find out what that is.
You know what it reminds me of? It's when Jesus called Peter, right? Like, hey, go throw the net over the side of the boat. All right, you got the biggest load of fish ever. You would think you would double. Everybody's probably like, why would you stop being a fisherman? You're the most successful fisherman now, right? You're going to leave to follow this man named Jesus? You should continue to fish, right? No. Yeah. The fish, the bounty was the catalyst to cause me to go follow Jesus. And that I feel like that's your story.
Yeah. I mean, literally, right? And we say this all the time, and I try to share it with people. It literally was a sign.
Yeah.
Right. And then it literally made me wonder, which was, if he can do that, I wonder what else he can do in store with me. And it was transformational. I mean, that's all I can say. And I mean, it sounds funny, and people who know me, I'm like, I'm just kind of who I am and what I am. Dude, this has happened over and over and over again for 23 years in probably every imaginable platform that I can think of, because he took us on a journey to make sure that I knew that it wasn't just in this or this or this or this. It wasn't about where I was. It was about who he was. And if I would say yes, he would continue to do this, over and over. It came to a point, part of the journey was having an encounter with him. And I just said, Lord, whatever the question is that you asked me to do, the answer is yes. And he said, what do you mean, Glenn? Which he knew. I said, it doesn't matter what the question is. My answer I'm making now for as long as I live is yes. So now I don't have to make a decision. I already made the decision. I'm just waiting for the question for you to ask me what you want me to do. I don't have to think about am I or am I committed that my answer is yes, whatever it looks like. And I don't know how to describe it, guys. It totally has freed me, which I think was, again, this point that he said, okay, great. I got all kinds of questions for you to go do. And now I don't have to worry about, are you ready or you aren't? Because you may or may not be, but I am. And you said yes. And the questions started coming, and it's been a ride. It's been crazy.
I love it. And that's really what God is calling all of us to, right? A radical obedience. Lord, you're the commander of the army. I'm reporting for duty. What do you have for me today? Right.
Yep. And each one of those stories could be totally different from mine, because he's already prepared the things to do for you, he says. So all I'm asking for you is say yes for the things I prepared for you to do. And the crazy part with me is he told me everything that you're doing, I prepared for you to do because I knew who you were. And so the questions I'm asking you that you already decided to say yes to are always already things I prepared for you to do, which I know would totally bless you and connect. He gave me a revelation of being in heaven and seeing the binders of the books of the works he prepared for me to do before I was born. And he said, here's where you are.
Glenn, that's so good. I'm glad that we were able to camp right there. I can imagine that there are people who are listening who, as you have shared your own experience, that's right where they're at. They're kind of in the in-between of yes, no, maybe. Your words are resounding in our spirit, I'm sure through the sound waves to our audience, that the answer is always yes. And you reap the benefits of that. Where does the story now go from here? Because now we're on the edge of our seat. You got us waiting here. And we're excited to see you're in that 3-week period, as you were saying earlier. What happens next?
Yeah. So we give notice in the time period of that 3 weeks. I'm saying, okay, God, I said yes. Now what do you want me to do? And he's so gentle and amazing at the same time. Cause I'm like, are we going to, Africa and live on all my mind's going crazy. And I'm preparing for the, I like braced myself. Here we go, and he's like, I want you to stay in Montana. I said, okay. He says, I want you to start a consulting company, and I want you to call it Kingdom Consulting. I said, really? He says, yeah. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I'm a business guy. That's not a big stretch. I'm like, well, that's not very far off the trunk. He's like, trust me, I'll take you a little bit at a time. I'm like, okay. He says, and then so he said, okay, well, that shouldn't be so bad. In my brain, right, I'm a business guy and have relationship. I'm like, well, I got all these relationships of all these businesses I've met before, which I have good relationship with because we spent a whole bunch of money all the way through the Flathead Valley where I was. And I'm like, okay. And yeah, sales and marketing is what I did, but I did operational stuff. And I'm like, so I'm processing all this. He says, yeah, that's good. And I said, oh, you had more to say. And he said, yes, I do. I'm like, oh, sorry. He goes, oh, that's okay. He says, so I want you to have a consulting company, right? And then I want you to share with them how to work on kingdom principles. And I'm like, okay. And then, by the way, 50% of your time of Kingdom Consulting, I want you to give away to nonprofits for free.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay. And I already said yes, right? So I'm kind of stuck. I'm being honest. I'm like, oh, wow. And I'm like, okay. So I share it with my wife. And then in the explanation, she goes, And then the 50% for free comes up and she goes, really? I said, yeah, I think we're going to starve, but it'll be okay. Because in my mind, I'm like, we're in a small location, in retrospect. And I'm like, okay, 50% of everything I do has to be for free. And yet you've called me into something that I have and then you layer the kingdom stuff on top of it. And I'm like, I don't really know what that is. So, but I did it. And here's crazy testimony. I still have the article from 2000 where a person through somebody, a nonprofit I was helping at the time, heard about it and then ended up writing a 1.5-page article in the local Valley paper. And the headline reads, Kingdom for Sale. I'm like, oh, that's kind of odd. But the whole article is about this journey and sewing into this nonprofit, these business practices and marketing, everything else. In the first year of Kingdom Consultants, I made the same money I did the last year of my 5 years as VP of Sales and Marketing of the resort management company.
Wow.
What?
And gave 50% of my time away for free.
The math doesn't make sense.
That's kingdom economics.
Yeah, kingdom economics. I love it.
It doesn't make earthly sense, right? And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And the relationships, I had people literally who heard that I had quit from some of the vendors, golf courses and Ski Mountain and all these other places, who were literally calling me and said, hey, I called your office and they said you're no longer there. I'm like, yeah. What are you doing? Well, I'm doing this thing, consulting or whatever. We want you. I mean, I didn't go out and talk to anybody. The phone literally started ringing. And then I had a timber company call me and say, hey, somebody from somebody, right, told me I should call you. We'd like to do some PR public relations. Have you ever done that before? And I said, well, I've had PR relationship companies that I paid, so I know some principles. Okay. Come on up. I mean, it just fell from the sky, literally.
Wow.
And then when I started with one nonprofit, then I started looking around, and the individuals that we had been sewing financially into the nonprofits from when I was the company, he said, just go back to them and say, how do I help you? And they're like, what are you talking about? And I said, well, I know we financially sewed in. I'm no longer working for the entity, but part of what I'm called to do is help you figure out how to develop. So we did marketing materials and donor development programs and board, all this stuff. So, I mean, he totally set me up without me realizing it at all.
Wow.
It was mind-boggling.
So Glenn, I want to ask about the consulting. Was this more just consulting from a practical standpoint? How do you help businesses grow?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the 50% for the nonprofits was that the profits were like Christian organizations and how to help them.
Yeah, most of them were, and it was very practical, applicable. But as I was doing it, he was speaking to me regarding, hey, and I can't explain it other than this. The things that I had been chewing on personally started coming out that I could actually apply corporately. Like we would be talking about donor development, and at that time it was really called fundraising, right? This is 2000. It's like, how do we raise funds? And what he was trying to get out of me was, we're not meeting people in order to get their money for what you do, which is totally fine. These individuals not only have financial resources, they have understanding and wisdom and passion and relationships. So why don't we approach them to connect with them on a relational basis of sharing what we do, how that maybe fulfill what they have a passion for, and connect passion for what they do with what we do. And that could be volunteer, right? I mean, if you volunteer for 100 hours a year in a ministry, it's almost more valuable, right, than sending a check. Right. And I didn't understand the nonprofits. I thought they just needed money because all I did was write checks and send them money. And then when I got inside, he's showing me, Glenn, these people are not supported spiritually. They're really not prayed for. They're in a constant battle with the dollar. But what they don't understand is I provide all those dollars. And I'm walking through this, right, with Kingdom Consulting going, you just provided everything. And he's saying, I need you to share that with them to shift their thinking, which is a kingdom principle that you can now help them apply inside of their nonprofits.
That's so
and I'm
good.
like,
That's solid.
okay. And it was just these little breadcrumbs, right, of just, okay, that makes sense. And then it just started making impact with them. And then I started basically journaling and writing down and note, okay, well, that's interesting. I'm not quite sure how that would work. And it's almost, I could see and understand that kingdom principle or biblical principle in the nonprofit, right, Christian-based nonprofit, but I was shoving it over here. And the whole time the Lord's saying, hey, yeah, that works in business too. I'm like, well, how? He says, just hang on, I'm going to show you. And it's just like, okay. Because my big dilemma was this, honestly, was when I stepped out and even started the business, right? I had my pastor at my church I was super involved in, obviously saying, hey, you should come and maybe minister and then, get involved more in the church and maybe get on church staff or whatever. I'm like, no. Right. And at the same time, when God was moving, I was sharing this with people in business and my clients. And now, relationships had known me for years for the business. I'm like, you should, this is what God's doing and I'm getting blessed and whatever. And neither one of those would really accept the other side. I don't know if that makes sense, but in church, I was saying, hey, if we got an organized plan and you guys started working out, we could actually accommodate more people and be more efficient, the strategic kind of element. And they're like, whoa, we don't want to, upset the apple cart or, manage God out of the building or whatever. I'm like, I don't know how you do that, but okay. And then in the business arena, I'm like, hey, if we had some passion and started sharing about what we believed. And, I used to be the Christian business guy, which had the Bible the second row down in my desk. And if there was a big problem in your personal life, you eventually came to me and sure, I would pray for you. And now I'm saying, guys, God is moving and he wants to do this stuff in your life and everything else. And they're like, well, too much. We want the parachute ripcord God. We don't want the intimate interaction, impactful every day at everything. And I'm like, okay, I'm stuck between these two realities and I don't know what to do. And God basically said, I want you to merge those. And that Kingdom Consulting was that first step of merging those two things together, which at the time I had no idea where it was going to lead or what it was going to become. I was just like, okay. A year later, at a conference with a local ministry that I had now been serving from Kingdom Consulting and previously had poured money into, I'm sitting at a conference and my 8-year-old daughter comes in to the conference. We're staying, it's on like a base, and I'm staying in housing there. And I'm on the phone working these things for these Kingdom Consulting customers. And she walks in the door, and the Lord speaks to me, and he says, ask her what you're supposed to be doing. I'm like, what? He says, ask her what you, not only you, your whole family is supposed to be doing. And I'm like, okay. Right? So I said, hey, Parker, that was my oldest daughter at that time, 8. I said, if you could go anywhere you want to go and do anything you want to do, what would it be? And I expected, Disneyland or, the zoo or something like that. And she turns around and her whole countenance changes and every hair on my body stands up. And she looks at me and says, Glenn, which is my first name, not daddy or dad. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm freaking out, right?
Wow.
Right? I'm like, whoa. She says, Glenn, yeah, I know exactly what we're supposed to do and exactly where we're supposed to go. This is 8. And I'm like, okay. And she says, we're supposed to go to an island. It's not Hawaii. And we're supposed to tell people about Jesus.
Whoa.
Mm-hmm. Whoa.
Whoosh, she's back to Parker, bubbly 8, wah, runs out the door. And I am literally shaking, going, what was that all about? 3 months later, he asked me, I need you to shut down Kingdom Consulting. Almost a year to the date of when I started. I'm like, what? He says, I need you to shut down Kingdom Consulting. I said, why? Because I want you, and this relationship was with YWAM, that we were at the base, said, I want you to shut down the business and go full-time into YWAM and be DTS and be a missionary. I'm like, no way. He's like, really?
Wow.
And I'm like, oh, I already said yes, didn't I? He said, yeah. I said, okay. So after having that success, him setting everything up, he gives me this definitive line, and I have to close, not maintain a few clients. No, you're closing the business. No more clients. Close everything down because I want you to go into full-time missions. And I'm like, okay, which was a fulfillment for my wife, who at a teenager had wanted to go to YWAM, decided not to do it. We got married, blah, 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 which I didn't really understand at the time. That was postscript. And then to really kick it off on the finance side, he says, oh, and the money that you've made and saved up and done everything, yeah, you can't use it to pay for your YWAM DTS. Like, what I have it, I can just pay for. And it was a crossroads. The whole family was going to go. He said, no, you can't do that. You have to pay off all of your debt. And then you have to go raise 100% of your support for your whole family to go to YWAM DTS outside of the state.
For those that are listening, can you tell us what DTS is?
Yeah, Discipleship Training School.
Yeah.
It's 3 months basically, and they do different levels. Ours was Crossroads, which meant over 21 or family or couples. And then after that 3 months, you have the opportunity then to go on anywhere from 6 to 8 week missions, normally out of country, if you're in the U.S., or out of the country where you do it, and then minister in relationship with churches and things outside your region. So I said, okay. He says, now, what I want you to do then, which we got accepted because I met the base director. We were supposed to go at this conference that my daughter told us we're going to be at. So we literally had a family that was in our church that somehow got evicted or their house burned. I can't remember. Didn't have a place to live. He says, I want you to give the keys to your second car, the keys to your house, keep everything in there, put it in storage in the garage, and give the keys to this family while you go on the 3 months DTS. And then if you go on to the mission field, and they don't pay rent.
Wow.
So we left, 5 of us in a Honda Accord, gave them the keys to the larger car, keys to our house. Dishes still in the cupboard, silverware in the drawer because they had nothing. Cleaned everything out, gave them the keys, and we drove to YWAM and started YWAM DTS, Discipleship Training School, in Chico, California. I will close this little section too because it's crazy. So second week at YWAM DTS, the kids are going to school. So they have a private school to train and keep their education while we're doing this discipleship training. Full immersion on campus, 5 days a week. I mean, it's amazing. Second weekend, our base director our leadership director of our DTS, Discipleship Training School, leans over. I'm literally sitting in the front row, right? Because I'm like all in. And he leans over the podium, and I kid you not, he says, hey, some of you guys are probably wondering where we're going to go for outreach. And of course, we all are, right? It's the very beginning, but we've got this goal of let's go do this stuff after we learn it. I'm like, yeah. And he says, well, here's what I'll tell you. I said, okay. And we're all there. There's probably 27 people in the room. He says, well, we're going to go to an island. It's not Hawaii. And we're going to tell people about Jesus.
Thank you, Parker.
And I kid you not, my wife, I literally looked up to him, I get my hair standing on end again. I literally fell out of my chair on the front row.
Wow.
And I'm just sitting there shaking my head. And everybody's like, what the heck's going on with him? And everybody's laughing. And then he made me get up and kind of share the story. And everybody was just like, whoa, what's going on? Wow. I mean, word for word.
Yes.
It was amazing. So
I love it. So you became a missionary for a little bit. Tell us, like, what happened next? Like, you're this life of adventure over here.
I know.
So we go on outreach. It's to Fiji. So my first missions was to Fiji. And everybody goes like, oh, yeah. I'm like, I know. He loves me, favorite. But somebody's got to do it, so I'll go.
Suffering for Jesus.
That's exactly right. And I've got the pictures to prove it, brother.
Yeah.
So we go through. I can't still touch any money, so I have to actually raise support for 5 to go on the missions trip.
Was that hard? Because you were such a
it was horrible. It was absolutely the best, worst thing that I say this all the time, but it was totally aggravating and yet at the same time humbling. And again, relying on him through people is not something I ever had to do. Right?
Wow.
The people that were giving to us were the people that I had been giving to and ministering with and sowing into. And again, when they heard these stories, just like I'm telling you guys, are like, yeah, you got to go.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, yeah, I know. So I had a small group in Bible study that put me in the center of the room and said, share what's happened. And they all came around me and they started praying for me. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And then they literally made me put out my hands and they put cash in my hand and I broke. I was bawling. I'm like, what is going on?
Wow.
But again, through that, he said to say, the things that I've called you to, Glenn, I need to provide for, because if you provide for it, you won't get the full blessing and impact of what I'm doing. I will never, ever, ever call you to something that I will not provide the provision to execute. You're not required to do this, because if you give up everything, and I know you have nothing, which you don't, even though you have cash in the bank, I have to be part of the equation to partner with you.
Yeah.
You're not called to go do something for me. You're called to go do something with me that does bless me and raise my name. And it's just like, whoa.
With me. Whoa. Glenn, that is so profound. I think what you're addressing is blessed are those who give and receive. I think especially in America, our American mindset is, well, I'm the giver. I'm the giver. I'm the giver.
Yeah.
But blessed are those who can also receive, and allowing others to give, allowing others to join in the kingdom partnership that God has set forth for you and others. It's a relationship. I just can't help but declare that it's deeper relationship with Christ and with others when you can give and receive. And
Absolutely.
Wow, that is so incredibly profound.
Yeah. It transformed the way I thought about any and every relationship I would ever have again. Because I thought that I was supposed to, again, sow into. And when I opened up and then he used people, and they were, the whole idea too of joyfully giving, these people were excited. They knew us. Some of them didn't, but most of them did, and said, dude, I remember a business guy that I work with who was one of the guys who took me out to lunch and asked me if there was a problem earlier, right? He said, I have never given to something that has as more fertile soil as you and your family.
Wow.
Wow.
And I'm like, whoa. And he says, I'm not giving this because of I believe I'm going to receive out of it. It's because it's the best place that I know of at this point to sow in, to see something. Because of what God's been doing, I know that this is going to be utilized and multiplied. And it just opened up these relationships to a level I'm like, wow, it's a whole different thing. I don't have to perform in order to be able to get to do something. I have to let him move. And to your point, open up and receive. And I can't remember how many people it was, but it was amazing. And then communication and connection, while we were gone and go through the thing. So yeah, when we hit Fiji, I started, sending information and stuff like that. But for 30 days, I'll back up. For 3 months, we were not quite there 3 months, almost 3 months in Fiji. From the day we arrived to the day that we left with our team, not with me personally, somebody got healed, delivered, or saved every single day for 3 months straight.
Amen.
Love it.
I was just shocked. It was unbelievable. And then the transformation back to the business, I was like, well, how does this, all relate? The last week, we had a huge favor with one of the leadership of the country. He said, hey, would you guys put on a business conference? And there was 2 other guys that had owned and operated their own businesses that were on the DTS team as well. And we said, yeah. And I said, so we got together on a cup of coffee and said, let's share some basics, ethics and some other stuff. I'm like, okay, that's great. And, and we'll share some testimonies, which obviously I had of, success and, that God was, calling business people. I didn't totally understand it yet. I just, I was one and he called me and this is what I thought was that call. We showed up and it was upstairs in Fiji, 90 degrees and 92% humidity. And we're standing up there sweating. And I remember, if it would be great if, a dozen or a couple dozen people showed up, was great. We had like 78 people show up.
Wow.
It was stacked everywhere. And we're like, what is going on? Because we didn't understand. And one of the local pastors, a couple that had pulled from churches and had put out the invitation, says, in our culture, we have a poverty mentality. I'm like, okay. I said, but business owners who step into business are considered sacrificing themselves because money is evil. And then when they start to make money, they're required to distribute any profits that they make, maintaining their own standard of living, basically when they had nothing, into all the family members and all these to the extended family, because everybody is in such need that they don't ever get to produce anything to multiply or grow. And then they're basically stated as being, well, you sacrifice yourself out and go out and make some money. And then the only way you can kind of really redeem that activity of being in business is to sow back into the family. And it just filters down and they can never get ahead. And I believe spiritual things in that regarding mammon spirit and this, whether you have it or whether you don't, there's this love of money connection that it's the source, which is a big deal for what we do. But in that moment, and we were like, well, no, God is the provider. And this is just a vehicle and all these principles that are basically speaking about your life. You just apply those, and my belief at that time, into your business. So it's quote unquote a Christian business and he'll bless you, but to pour everything back out and not resow that into the business and grow it, you're missing this opportunity. Well, it was a spiritual battle and we ended up having to pray over. And I mean, people got delivered in the meeting regarding, oh, I'm not evil. No, you're not evil. Well, money's evil. I'm working for money. So that makes me evil. That was the connotation. It's like, absolutely not. So biblically went through some stuff and people got radically healed. A couple of people got saved, and was just like this whole spiritual thing happened while we're talking about business and this whole thing of the spiritual dynamic of it. which I had known but never really experienced that way. And it was over and it was amazing. And everybody left, and I'm sitting in this open air, third floor, and I'm just bawling. I'm like, Lord, I see what you see now, and I understand. I can empathize. I can't fully understand what they're talking about. But he then gave me revelation of how I used to operate, calling it Christianese, but still I was supplying, and I was, the whole thing. And I'm like, wow. And he says, yeah, that's what I want to eradicate from the business arena. I mean, and you just did a small part of it, and it's part of this journey. And again, I sat up there and said, God, if you'll let me do this, whatever this is regarding this arena that you just happened, then I'll do this for the rest of my life.
Wow.
And we returned from Fiji, sold our house in 3 weeks, moved down, went on staff, and I've, led several teams back into Fiji, and then another whole chapter, right? That page of those works, assignments assigned for me got turned. And when we started a whole nother journey as full-time missionaries with 100% support to go after that. And we did. And we started traveling to different nations. And I went to the Luzon conference in Pattaya, Thailand. Again, how I got there, I have no idea, via relationship, and sat into the session that was part of the Luzon, what they call Occupational Paper 49, which talked about business as missions. The very first conversation about business as a vehicle to propel missions forward. And that, and I was like, I don't know why I'm here. And it was one of those, not just for me, but even I believe for the missions and business connection. It was one of those hallmark moments of an open conversation and dialogue with, hundreds of people about what does this look like and how does it work was there. And I was sitting in the middle of it, just sitting there shaking my head going, what is going on?
Wow.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
So Glenn, you've been doing the missionary thing for a few years. I understand now that you're back in kingdom, in a sense, consulting, helping companies focus on kingdom work. Can you talk about, maybe as we close, a little bit about how you got back there and what you're doing today?
Yeah, we returned, got connected, started doing some training and development in a school at actually Bethel Church called School of Supernatural Business. And this is where God started actually writing curriculum and things that we use now. I used in Businessry, and now we're using in Kingdom Business Catalyst. And the basis of all of it is how do we reintroduce the Spirit of God, the power of God, the relationship with the Lord and the Holy Spirit in your day-to-day business operations, not just when there's emergency, I pray. Yep. There's consistency of prayer. There's how do we hear, utilize, and make decisions out of the prophetic? How do we basically go back and look at Spirit-led strategies of what our spiritual strengths and weaknesses are, as well as our physical or our financial. So it's been this journey of processing this with the Lord, really out of revelation. And then the beauty for me is he's given me practical application with small businesses, large businesses, nonprofits, doesn't really matter. This whole journey gave me an opportunity to do these things and build a platform and a process, not the answer. He's the answer. The process gets us reconnected to integrating this spirituality, this personal connection in and through our business all day long and have kingdom impact. What he really told me, which these tools help us understand and then actually illustrate, is that business was not designed just to make money. Business was designed to build the kingdom, seek the kingdom first and his righteousness, a right relationship with him, and everything gets added. What gets added in a business that's doing that is people, which you get to impact for the kingdom, and resources, which you get to sow back in to make the business grow. For more money? No. For more opportunity to touch more people, which then extends the kingdom, and it just goes on and on and on. That's what the basis of Kingdom Business Catalyst is a platform now with several other individuals and more that will come, is to give these assets and support and connection to businesses that are seeking this kingdom. I've heard that I'm called to be about the kingdom. I heard and understand, right, that business, maybe in the 7 spheres, which is a YWAM thing, or the 7 mountains is out there, that I'm supposed to do that, right? But I have found very few people can show you how to do it. We actually break it down and show you how to do it. So there's really 7 pieces of Kingdom Business Catalyst. That's connection, getting a relationship with other Kingdom business people that will inspire you and ultimately sow into you as you sow into them. Training and development. We use a guide service instead of coaching and consulting, because we actually assign guides that walk with you on a long-term basis of how to apply it. Mentor relationships. The Lord told me there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of retired business people who don't know what to do and are carrying the huge amount of wisdom, and we have not utilized it. So we're pulling a mentorship network together and then assigning mentors to these businesses that have practical application experience. Services regarding business to business service network that you can get and buy and talk the kingdom with people that you buy and sell to. Spiritual services, there's a laundry list there. How do you do strategic prayer program in your business? Do you actually track your prayers? And then ultimately the last piece, which we said will be a capital fund. Our goal is to grant, loan, and invest in entrepreneurs, small businesses, or kingdom businesses that are expanding and need assets, but that'll be partnered with all those other pieces. So you have connection and training and guidance and mentorship and services around the capital in order to grow your business. And the Lord said, with that vehicle intact, which it's all launched now on a small scale, but is growing, he says the investment ratio from your capital fund, your default ratio, will be less than 3%. And the whole world will want to come and see how you do it, which gives us the opportunity to show who is doing it, because it's all about reintegration with him. And then the last piece is we have an outflow funnel where we're starting at 10, but our goal is to get to 50% or more of all our net income at KBC is flowing out back into nonprofit organizations, international NGOs to transform that, which could be in business, could be just in straight mercy ministries and different things like that. So we've designed what I call a mammon defense plan so that as we receive the millions that he showed us, we already have a plan of where we're pushing it out, which he said, if you got a plan to push it out, then I'll flood the front with as much or more than you can imagine.
Oh, that's so good. So helpful, so practical.
Yep.
You know, I think I would imagine in our lifetime, churches are going to have a harder time, Christian organizations are going to have a harder time with the whole nonprofit thing, right? And so this is building in a support network for kingdom, the spreading of the kingdom, right? So it's just such a practical need. We're going long already. So I was hoping, and I don't know if you can, do you have like a little favorite example of a company that you've worked with, these principles God has really blessed? And do you have one that you can share real quickly?
Oh, absolutely. There's a bunch, but when you said that, a regional heating and air conditioning business, been in business for 28 years, saw me speak at a function at a church, said, hey, I want to have coffee with you. I had coffee with him. I said what I just told you, your business isn't to make money, it's to make the kingdom. And he's had a Christian ethos for a long time. He goes, I don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, okay, I assign this to everybody that I work with. And anybody. I said, I'll tell you what, will you do something for 30 days and then call me if something shifts? He says, yes. I said, okay, you play praise and worship in your place of business for 30 days straight, 24/7. And you commit to come into your office twice a week for 15 minutes and just ask the Lord what he wants to do with your business. Don't ask him about what you need. Simply ask him the question, what do you want to do with my business? If something in the atmosphere does not shift and in you in 30 days, don't call me. If it does, then you call me back. 2 weeks later, he calls me and said, okay, we got to have coffee. I said, what's going on? I said, I have everything. I said, okay, here's what you need to do. And we started this process of Kingdom Business Catalyst, doing strategies, spirit-led strategic planning, attaching strategic prayer program with trackable prayer orders and weekly prophetic words, all these elements, and started walking through them. Last year, I'm in the 4th year of this now. In the first probably 6 to 8 months, super difficult. Then something started to break and they started to understand a little bit. During COVID, heating and air conditioning business, which is a service-related business that has to go into people's houses, right? In a year and a half of that whole kind of COVID thing that started, they grew 300%.
Wow.
They went from 27 employees to 68 employees in less than a year and a half. He could not buy transportational service vehicles fast enough because he couldn't find them to buy because they weren't available. Wow. Here's the crazier point. Almost 85% of the individuals that they added, they never advertised for. Mm. We simply understood the Lord would say, we're going to need this because of this is where I'm going. We would intercede for that position. People would literally walk through the door and say, I think I'm supposed to work here. Where did you hear about it? So I saw an ad or something or whatever. We would hire them before the position was open. And within a week of being hired, going through training, the position would open or we'd need to add it. From 28 to almost 70 people in 3 years' time.
Which is incredible during the COVID period because nobody could hire anybody, right? It was a great exactly right. employment shortage.
They had vendors that they were buying from that were saying, what in the world are you doing? We can't keep up with what the products you need to buy it. So they got a whole elevated position with the companies in order to get priority product to the point where they had so much excess, right, in profitability and everything else that the owner had a dream and said, I saw a storehouse and all this other stuff. And he said, I don't know what it means. He took the cash, which he could have pocketed because it was sheer profit, and they went out and pre-bought. This was kind of on the front edge of COVID. We didn't know that we were going to run out of supply. He went and bought all the supplies and pieces and parts and equipment, stored them literally in a building that he had emptied to put it into. And when nobody in the state could get the products, he had a storehouse full of product that he was basically serving. People had like 2 to 3 months, right, of wait time in order to get this stuff done. He was executing and cleaning up with a 3 times larger staff with all the equipment he needed that had pre-bought that the Lord had told him to do it.
I love it.
You said earlier, Glenn, I don't think it's minuscule. The term is businessry. That's intertwining business and ministry for the sake of the kingdom. Wow. That is just amazing. Thank you so much for being on Jesus in My Life today.
Yep, my pleasure.
Jack, I imagine that there's going to be a part 2 with Glenn for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
Because at least I'll want to have a part 2 with him.
Yeah, absolutely. This is amazing. So appreciative. The foundation of our podcast, it comes from Luke chapter 8, where Jesus delivers a man from demon possession, literally delivers him, heals him, saves him. And Jesus gives him assignment and says, now go and tell your family what I've done for you. And he goes not only to his family, but to the rest of the town, sharing all that Christ has done. Thank you, Glenn, so much for inviting us into your story and sharing all that Christ has done. We know that the best is yet to come. And God bless you in your family, in your life, and in your continued ministry as you continue to say yes.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys.
It's so good to have you, Glenn. Everybody else, stay tuned for more episodes every Tuesday. God bless. And now a reflection on today's interview. As I think of all that Glenn did, all the adventures God put him through, because he simply decided that his answer was always going to be yes to whatever God told him, reminds me of Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10, which is spoken really to all of us that have placed our lives in Jesus. And it says, for we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. I believe God has an adventure for all of us if we are willing to simply say yes to whatever He wants, whenever He wants. And it's not for our bad. It's not to bring us hardship. It's to bring fulfillment into our lives. And I see Glen's life. He is so fulfilled in what God has put him through, even if it doesn't look like what he thought it was going to look like. God is good, and he wants to do good through us. We will find joy in doing the good works that he has prepared for us in advance. Let's simply say yes. God bless you, and stay tuned every Tuesday for new episodes of Jesus in My Life.
Thank you for listening to Jesus in My Life. New episodes release every Tuesday. Subscribe on your preferred podcasting platform so you don't miss a single episode. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please consider sharing this podcast with a friend or family member. If you would like to help our visibility online, consider rating us and posting a review on Apple Podcast. Have an awesome Jesus in My Life story? Contact us at jesusinmylifepodcast@gmail.com.